Welcome to Whispered Histories. Our journey tonight is not one of battles or of crowns, but of the quiet, relentless turning of a single, extraordinary mind. What does it mean to truly see the world? Not just to look, but to see. To see the hidden mechanics in a bird's wing, the elegant mathematics in a flower's petal, and the echo of a soul behind a simple smile. Tonight, we travel back to a time of breathtaking change, to the heart of the Renaissance, to explore a mind that saw no line between art and science, between the human and the divine. He was a painter, an engineer, an anatomist, a musician, and a dreamer. This is the story of Leonardo da Vinci and the mind of a genius. Our story begins not in a grand palace or on a bloody battlefield, but under the warm Tuscan sun, around the year 1452. In the small hilltop town of Vinci, nestled among rolling hills and ancient olive groves, a child was born. His name was Leonardo. He was the illegitimate son of a local notary and a peasant woman. In that rigid society, this was a mark against him. He could not attend the university, nor could he follow in his father's footsteps. But this circumstance, this accident of birth, gave him a strange kind of freedom. He was untethered from expectation. His classroom was not a dusty library. It was the world itself. From his earliest days, he was drawn to the rhythms of nature. He would wander the countryside for hours, his eyes filled with a quiet intensity. He watched the way the Arno River carved its path through the valley, the way light filtered through the leaves of a fig tree, the way a lizard would dart across a sun-warmed stone, and he began to draw. Not for fame, not for fortune, but out of a deep, burning need to understand. His first notebooks were filled with sketches of plants, animals, and rock formations, the first whispers of a lifelong conversation with the universe. At the age of 14, Leonardo's journey took him to the bustling heart of the Renaissance, the city of Florence. Imagine the sounds, the clang of the blacksmith's hammer, the murmur of merchants in the piazza, the chiseling of stone for a new cathedral. It was a city electric with creation. Here, he was apprenticed to one of the great masters of the time, Andrea del Verrocchio. Verrocchio's workshop was no simple artist's studio. It was a laboratory of innovation. In a single day, one might learn how to mix pigments for a painting, and then how to cast a colossal bronze statue. One might study the chemistry of glazes, and then the engineering required to lift a heavy dome. For Leonardo, this was paradise. His mind, which refused to stay in any single box, was allowed to roam free. He learned to paint, yes, but he also learned metallurgy, carpentry, mechanics, and anatomy. He saw, even then, that all knowledge was connected, that the same divine principles that shaped a human bone also shaped the branch of a tree and the course of a river. It was here that his genius began to truly announce itself. While working on a painting of the baptism of Christ, Verrocchio tasked Leonardo with painting a single angel. When it was finished, the story goes that Leonardo's angel was so filled with life, so profoundly beautiful and real, that Verrocchio was humbled and resolved to never paint again. While other artists saw the world as it was, Leonardo was obsessed with how it worked. He began his now famous notebooks, thousands upon thousands of pages filled with his observations and ideas. And to protect his work, or perhaps simply as a quirk of his left-handed nature, he wrote in reverse, a mirror script that others found almost impossible to read. His early paintings were already different. He developed a technique he called sfumato, meaning turned to smoke. He softened the edges, blurred the lines, and created an atmosphere of gentle, hazy mystery. His figures were not stiff or posed. They were alive. They thought. They felt. You could sense the whisper of a soul within them. The mind of the genius was beginning to reveal itself, not just on the canvas, but in every observation, every sketch, and every secret page of his growing collection of notebooks. In the year 1482, at the age of 30, Leonardo made a decision that would define the next chapter of his life. He left Florence, the vibrant cradle of his youth, and turned his gaze towards the powerful and opulent city of Milan. Milan was a different world, more martial, more political, ruled by the shrewd and ambitious Duke Ludovico Sforza. To win the patronage of such a man, one needed to offer more than just a well-made painting. Leonardo understood this completely. Before he arrived, he sent the Duke a letter of introduction that has become legendary. In it, he listed his capabilities in 10 detailed points. One might expect an artist to speak of color, of form, of beauty. But Leonardo's letter was that of a master of war. He began, "I have a method for constructing very light, strong bridges, adapted to be easily carried. I have methods for destroying every fortress or other stronghold, unless it be founded on rock. I will make covered chariots, safe and unassailable, which, entering among the enemy with their artillery, there is no body of men so great that they would not break them. And behind these, infantry could follow quite unhurt, and without any hindrance, he went on, describing mortars that could hurl storms of stone, silent catapults, and ways to divert rivers from besieged cities. Only at the very end, in the 10th and final point, did he add, almost as an afterthought, likewise in painting, I can do everything possible as well as any other, whoever he may be." The Duke was intrigued. Here was a mind of immense and varied power. Leonardo was welcomed into the Milanese court. For nearly 2 decades, this would be his home. He was not just a painter. He was a court entertainer, a designer of elaborate festivals, a military engineer, and an architect. But it was in a quiet, humble dining hall that he would begin his most enduring masterpiece. The Duke asked him to paint a mural in the refectory of the monastery of Santa Maria delle Grazie. The subject was a classic one, the Last Supper. For centuries, this scene had been painted in the same way, a static, solemn row of figures with Judas often isolated on the opposite side of the table. It was a scene of divinity, but it often lacked humanity. Leonardo saw something different. He saw not a holy tableau, but a single shattering moment of human drama. The instant after Christ says the words, "One of you will betray me," he abandoned the traditional fresco technique, which required painting quickly on wet plaster. It was too fast for his slow, contemplative process. Instead, he experimented, painting directly onto the dry stone wall, with a mix of tempera and oil. It was a technical gamble that would, tragically, cause the painting to begin decaying within his own lifetime. But it allowed him the freedom he craved. For years he worked, Sometimes he would stand on the scaffolding from dawn until dusk, never even pausing to eat, painting relentlessly. Other times, he would arrive, stare at the wall in absolute silence for an hour, and then leave without making a single brushstroke. The prior of the monastery complained to the Duke about the delay. Leonardo calmly explained that genius sometimes consists of working the least when the mind is forming its ideas. He wandered the streets and markets of Milan, searching for the perfect faces for his apostles. He sought out grizzled old men, criminals, and common folk, sketching their features and expressions in his notebook. He was not painting saints, he was painting men. He wanted to capture the wave of emotion that rippled out from Christ's words: shock, denial, fear, anger, and sorrow. And at the center, Christ sits in an aura of perfect, tragic calm. The eye is drawn to him, the serene heart of the storm. The finished work was a revolution, a frozen moment of profound psychological truth. It was more than a painting. It was a study of the human soul. While his public works brought him fame, his private work was an obsession that bordered on the divine. During his years in Milan, his collection of notebooks grew into a vast secret library of the natural world. This was the true work of his life, the endless, restless exploration of everything. Imagine him by candlelight, in the cold cellar of a hospital, the scent of antiseptic herbs in the air. Society forbade the dissection of human bodies, but Leonardo's thirst for knowledge was stronger than any taboo. With scalpel in hand, he carefully peeled back the layers of the human form, not with morbid curiosity, a reverence. He wanted to understand the machine of the body. He drew the intricate web of muscles and tendons in the hand, comparing them to the strings of a lute. He was the first to accurately map the chambers of the human heart and to understand it as a muscular pump. His anatomical drawings are so precise, so breathtakingly beautiful, that they remain marvels of science and art to this day. Or imagine him on a hillside lying in the grass for hours, watching the flight of birds. He filled page after page with sketches of their wings, analyzing the way they caught the air, the subtle adjustments of feather and bone. He believed, with all his being, that man could fly. He designed ornithopters, proto-helicopters, and parachutes, elaborate contraptions of wood, leather, and linen. He dreamed of the day humanity would take to the skies, a dream that would not be realized for another 400 years. When French forces invaded Milan in 1499, Leonardo was forced to flee. He left behind his largest project, a colossal bronze horse, which was used for target practice by the invading soldiers and destroyed. A monument to his ambition, lost to the chaos of war. He returned to Florence, now a celebrated master. But the city had a new hero, a young, brooding, and ferociously talented sculptor named Michelangelo. The two men were titans, and their personalities could not have been more different. Leonardo was elegant, charming, and endlessly diplomatic. Michelangelo was brutish, passionate, and saw the painter as a rival. They were commissioned to paint two massive battle scenes on opposite walls of the Palazzo Vecchio, the seat of government. It was to be the ultimate artistic duel. The city held its breath. Leonardo chose the Battle of Anghiari, a scene of ferocious, swirling chaos, with men and horses locked in a desperate struggle for survival. He once again experimented with a new technique, trying to encaustically set the pigments with heat from giant braziers. It failed disastrously. The colors ran, the paint dripped, and the masterpiece melted into a ruin before it was ever truly finished. On the opposite wall, Michelangelo never even began. The Battle of Giants ended in a silent, mutual defeat. It was during this period of turmoil and rivalry that he worked on his most famous and most mysterious portrait, a painting of the wife of a Florentine merchant, Lisa del Giocondo, the Mona Lisa. For 16 years, he kept it with him. It was never delivered to the client. He worked on it and reworked it, constantly refining it. He carried it with him on all his travels, from Italy to France, like a constant companion. It was more than a portrait. It was his ultimate statement on humanity. He used his sfumato technique to create a face that seems to live and breathe. Her expression is uncertain, shifting between joy and sorrow. And her eyes seem to follow you, holding a secret knowledge that lies just beyond our grasp. It is the portrait of a specific woman, and at the same time, the portrait of us all. The world was changing once more. As the 1500s unfolded, an aging Leonardo traveled to Rome, the spiritual and artistic heart of Christendom. He was now in his 60s. Rome was a city of feverish ambition, smelling of marble dust and incense. It was a place being remade into a monument of power and faith, and at its center were the popes, commanding the services of the greatest artists alive. But this was a Rome that belonged to younger, bolder titans. On any given day, Leonardo might hear the whispers of Michelangelo's divine, back-breaking work on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, or see the brilliant, effortless grace of the young master, Raphael, whose paintings in the papal apartments were the talk of the city. These men produced masterpieces with a speed and certainty that was alien to Leonardo's slow, wandering, and endlessly questioning process. He, the man who had once been the marvel of Italy, now felt like a visitor from another time, a quiet philosopher in a city of kings. He was given rooms in the Apostolic Palace and a modest stipend, but he received no grand commissions. The grand artistic statements were given to others. His mind, however, did not rest. It could not rest. Denied the grand canvas, he poured his boundless energy into the familiar, private pages of his notebooks. In the Vatican gardens, he would sit for hours, studying the intricate spirals of a pine cone or the circulation of sap in a plant, seeking the universal patterns of life. He undertook ambitious engineering projects, designing a new mint for the papal state, and developing immense parabolic mirrors, hoping to harness the power of the sun itself into a solar furnace. But he was met with a deep and wearying frustration. His most ambitious project, a plan to drain the pestilential Pontine marshes south of the city, was ignored, dismissed as the dream of an old man. His vital anatomical studies were brought to a sudden halt. He shared his workshop with a German mirror maker who, perhaps out of jealousy or simple misunderstanding, spread malicious rumors about him. Whispers of necromancy and forbidden practices, fueled by Leonardo's nocturnal visits to the city's morgues, reached the ears of the Pope. His scientific inquiry was silenced by gossip and superstition. It is during this period that he drew a self-portrait. It is the only one that we can be certain is of him. The face is not that of a celebrated artist, but of a weary sage, a prophet. Let your mind's eye trace the lines on his face. The brow, deeply furrowed with a lifetime of thought. The deep-set eyes, which seem to hold the weight of 1,000 unasked questions, and the magnificent, sorrowful waterfall of a beard that flows down his chest. It is a portrait of profound introspection, the face of a man who understood the universe, but was perhaps beginning to feel that the universe had not quite understood him. And then, as the twilight of his life deepened, a final, warm embrace. From across the Alps, a new voice called to him. It was the young, charismatic King of France, Francis I. The king was a great admirer of the Italian Renaissance, and he revered Leonardo not as a relic of the past, but as the greatest mind of his age. He did not want Leonardo for what he could produce. He wanted him for who he was. He invited Leonardo to come to France, offering him not a commission, but a home. The title he was given was First Painter, Engineer, and Architect to the King. But more than that, he was offered reverence and peace. In the autumn of 1516, Leonardo began his last great journey. Imagine the sight. An old man with a long white beard, crossing the formidable Alps on the back of a mule. With him, he carried not riches, but his 3 most treasured paintings: Saint John the Baptist, the Virgin and Child with Saint Anne, and his constant companion, the Mona Lisa. And he brought his greatest treasure of all, the leather-bound chests containing the thousands of pages of his notebooks. The king gave him a beautiful manor house, the Château du Clos Lucé. It was a peaceful sanctuary surrounded by gardens with a gentle river flowing nearby. A secret underground tunnel connected the manor to the royal palace, and the young king would often walk through it to visit the old master. Here, Leonardo spent his final 3 years. He was not required to paint or to build. He was simply asked to talk. The king would sit for hours, utterly captivated, as Leonardo spoke of the properties of water, the anatomy of a woodpecker's tongue, the secrets of color and shadow, and the philosophies that connected all things. Francis later said that he did not believe any other man had ever been born who knew as much as Leonardo. In the calm of the French countryside, Leonardo embarked on his final project. He did not try to start a new masterpiece. Instead, he turned his methodical mind to the immense, chaotic legacy of his own life, his notebooks. With the help of his faithful student, Francesco Melzi, he began the monumental task of organizing the thousands upon thousands of pages. It was an attempt to put his universe in order, to build a great paper cathedral of all he had learned. It was a race against the failing light. He grew frail. A stroke paralyzed his right hand. Yet, being left-handed, he could still draw and write, still trying to capture the last few thoughts. On May 2nd, 1519, at the age of 67, Leonardo da Vinci passed away. The legend, told by the artist Vasari, is that he died in the arms of the king, a final, poignant image of the bond between the old master and the young monarch who had seen his true greatness. But the story of his mind does not end there. His paintings would be celebrated. The Mona Lisa would become the most famous portrait in the world. The Last Supper would be an icon of faith and art. But his true legacy, the vast ocean of his scientific and intellectual work, was locked away. He left his notebooks to his student Melzi, who treasured them but never published them. After Melzi's death, a great tragedy occurred. This unparalleled collection, the most complete record of a genius in human history, was not understood. It was broken up, sold, and scattered across the libraries and private collections of Europe for centuries. Pages containing designs for flying machines were treated as mere curiosities. Anatomical drawings of breathtaking accuracy were hidden away. The thoughts of the man who dreamed of the future were dismantled, sold for scraps, and lost. Only slowly, over hundreds of years, were the pages rediscovered. Scholars in dusty libraries began to piece them together, decoding the mirror script, and a new picture of Leonardo emerged, one that stunned the world. This was not just a painter. This was the man who had understood blood circulation a century before it was proven. The man who designed a movable armored vehicle, the precursor to the tank. The man who drew the human fetus in the womb with breathtaking accuracy. The world is only now, 500 years later, beginning to catch up to the full, staggering scope of his mind. And so, our story of Leonardo comes to a close. A life that reminds us that the greatest journey is the one taken by the mind, that art and science are but two different languages telling the same story of the world's beauty. His body of work is a testament to the power of a quiet, patient, and endlessly curious gaze. As the echoes of his genius fade into the quiet of the night, allow your own mind to find its peace. Let go of the day's complexities. Let his dreams of flight guide your own dreams. The story is over. There is nothing left to do now. But rest. Let the music guide you into a deep and peaceful slumber. Sleep now.